Good morning. I'm Nova Blake, and this is your complete political briefing for Friday, April 17th, 2026. Today, a 10-day ceasefire takes hold in Lebanon as the House War Powers vote on Iran fails by a single vote. Let's get into it. But before we do, please subscribe to this channel to watch our daily bulletin every morning at 6 a.m., starting with the top stories from across the American political landscape. President Trump announced a major diplomatic breakthrough on Thursday, April 16th, a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon taking effect at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The truce was announced after Trump personally spoke by phone with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, following their country's first direct diplomatic talks in 34 years, which were held in Washington on Tuesday. The ceasefire halts more than 6 weeks of Israeli military operations against Iran-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon, which had killed more than 2,100 people and displaced over 1 million Lebanese civilians, and it is expected to clear a major obstacle for the broader United States and Iran negotiations. The House of Representatives voted on Thursday to reject a war powers resolution that would have required the Trump administration to cease military operations against Iran without explicit congressional authorization. And the measure failed by just a single vote, 213 to 214. All but one Democrat, Representative Jared Golden of Maine, voted in favor of halting the war. Only one Republican, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, crossed party lines to support the resolution. The razor-thin margin, far closer than last month's attempt, signals growing Republican unease with the conflict, and with the 60-day war powers clock set to expire on April 29th, the pressure on Congress to act is increasing rapidly. House Democrats formally introduced 6 articles of impeachment against Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Wednesday, accusing him of conducting an unauthorized war against Iran without congressional approval, committing potential violations of the laws of armed conflict, mishandling classified military information in the Signal messaging app scandal, obstructing congressional oversight, abusing his power to politicize the armed forces, and bringing disrepute upon the United States military. The resolution was led by Representative Yasemin Ansari of Arizona, the first Iranian-American Democrat elected to Congress, with 8 co-sponsors. The measure has virtually no chance of passing, given the current Republican majority in the House, but Democrats have made Hegseth their primary cabinet target, following the earlier ousters of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Attorney General Pam Bondi. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. faced a contentious grilling before the House Ways and Means Committee on Thursday in his first congressional testimony since September, taking questions on vaccines, autism research, measles outbreaks, massive budget cuts to the National Institutes of Health, and his management of the department. A rare Republican rebuke came from Representative Blake Moore of Utah, who said he was underwhelmed by Kennedy and President Trump's September claim that autism was caused by mothers taking Tylenol during pregnancy, saying his wife was deeply hurt by the allegation. Democrats hammered Kennedy over his suspension of pro-vaccine public messaging campaigns and his stewardship of the Department of Health and Human Services during what medical authorities are calling the worst measles outbreak in modern American history. Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor issued an unusual and highly public apology on Wednesday for remarks she made at a public appearance about her colleague Justice Brett Kavanaugh's upbringing in connection with a recent immigration ruling. Sotomayor had said at the University of Kansas School of Law that Kavanaugh, in his concurring opinion backing the Trump administration's aggressive ICE patrol tactics in California, was a man whose parents were professionals who probably doesn't really know any person who works by the hour. Sotomayor released a formal statement Wednesday saying she regretted her hurtful comments and had personally apologized to Kavanaugh. The incident exposed a rare and public fracture in the collegial facade the Supreme Court has long maintained, even as its justices divide sharply on high-stakes rulings. The United States Commission of Fine Arts voted Thursday to grant initial approval to President Trump's proposed 250-foot Triumphal Arch to be built near the Arlington Memorial Bridge between the Lincoln Memorial and Arlington National Cemetery. The commission, now composed entirely of Trump appointees, voted 5-0 on the concept, while requesting design revisions, including reconsidering a gold-plated Lady Liberty-style statue and pair of eagles planned to top the structure. The arch would be more than twice as tall as the Lincoln Memorial, taller than France's Arc de Triomphe and the largest structure in Washington. A federal lawsuit has already been filed to block construction on grounds that the arch would disrupt the historic sightline between the Lincoln Memorial and Arlington House. Iran issued a stark new threat Thursday, warning that it would blockade the Sea of Oman and the Red Sea unless the United States ends its naval blockade of Iranian ports. The threat, which would directly target maritime routes used by Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and international shipping headed to European and Asian markets, dramatically raised the stakes of the standoff in the waterways surrounding Iran. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said at a Pentagon briefing Thursday that the United States had widened its blockade efforts beyond the Strait of Hormuz, directing American military forces around the world to pursue and intercept any vessel tied to Iran or suspected of carrying supplies supporting Tehran's government, including oil, weapons, metals, and electronics. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stood at a Pentagon briefing Thursday, flanked by General Kane, and told reporters the naval blockade of Iranian ports would last for as long as it takes, and that United States forces are locked and loaded to resume major combat operations in Iran if a long-term ceasefire deal is not reached. Hegseth said the military remains postured to restart attacks at literally a moment's notice. The White House expressed continued optimism about reaching a deal, with Pakistani Field Marshal Asim Munir continuing his diplomatic shuttle diplomacy between Islamabad and Tehran in an effort to persuade Iran to return to peace talks. The original 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran is set to expire on April 22nd. 10 House Republicans broke with their party on Wednesday to vote with Democrats on advancing a measure that would restore temporary protected status, or TPS, for eligible Haitian immigrants for 3 years. The bill, advanced through a discharge petition led by Representative Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, cleared a procedural hurdle and moved toward a final House vote. The legislation comes as the Trump administration has aggressively worked to end TPS protections for hundreds of thousands of immigrants from Haiti and other countries, drawing legal challenges and bipartisan pushback from members of Congress representing states with large Haitian communities. A growing number of Republican lawmakers privately expressed alarm this week over President Trump's rhetorical escalation on Iran, with members of the House Main Street Caucus, a group of nearly 100 GOP members, exchanging concerns in a private text chain following Trump's Easter Sunday social media post, threatening to destroy an entire civilization. Multiple members questioned whether the rhetoric was politically damaging to the party ahead of November's midterm elections. Publicly, Republican leaders have largely maintained support for the president's military campaign, but the private dissent signals that the wall of Republican loyalty could fracture if the war continues toward and beyond the 60-day war powers deadline. Now, turning to Washington and the latest actions from the current administration. Here are 10 significant developments from the administration this week. President Trump announced on Thursday, April 16th, a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, brokered through direct personal phone calls with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Lebanese President Aoun. The truce began at 5 p.m. Eastern Time and is the first halt to fighting between Israel and Iran-backed Hezbollah since Israeli military operations resumed in Lebanon in early March. Trump also invited both leaders to the White House for face-to-face talks, saying he expects peace between the two countries to happen quickly. The Lebanon ceasefire directly addresses what Tehran had identified as a major prerequisite for broader Iran peace negotiations, potentially unlocking a path to a second round of direct United States-Iran talks. Defense Secretary Hegseth and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Kane held a Pentagon press briefing Thursday, announcing that the United States military has expanded the Iran blockade globally. directing forces worldwide to pursue Iranian-flagged vessels and ships suspected of carrying material support for Iran beyond the original naval blockade confined to the Strait of Hormuz and nearby waters. Hegseth warned Iran that its remaining power generation, energy infrastructure, and dual-use civilian targets remain under American threat if peace talks fail, saying in a prepared statement that the United States is locked and loaded at the push of a button. President Trump nominated Erika Schwartz, a former Deputy Surgeon General of the United States, to serve as the next director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, on Thursday, April 16th. The position has been vacant since Kennedy fired the previous CDC director last year, a removal that drew significant controversy and legal questions. Schwartz's nomination comes as the country is battling a deadly measles outbreak that health officials have described as the worst in a generation, driven in part by declining vaccination rates. The United States Commission of Fine Arts voted Thursday to grant initial concept approval to President Trump's proposed Triumphal Arch in Washington. The arch, planned at 250 feet tall near the Arlington Memorial Bridge, would be the largest structure in the capital city and modeled after but taller than Paris's Arc de Triomphe. The all-Trump-appointed commission approved the concept design while requesting revisions, and the project now moves to a revised design phase before a final vote. Critics, veterans organizations, and a federal lawsuit contend the structure would irreparably disrupt one of Washington's most historically sacred sightlines. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. testifying before Congress on Thursday was the first of 7 scheduled hearings over the coming week in which the Health and Human Services Secretary will face congressional scrutiny. Among the specific issues Kennedy faced Thursday, massive cuts to the National Institutes of Health, the ongoing measles outbreak, the administration's suspension of pro-vaccine public messaging campaigns, and questions about autism research. Kennedy defended the administration's 2027 budget proposal, which calls for a $15.8 billion reduction to his department. A separate Trump nomination Thursday of Erika Schwartz to lead the CDC represents an attempt to fill a critical vacancy that has hampered the department's public health response capacity for nearly a year. The Trump administration expanded its economic warfare against Iran on Wednesday through additional Treasury Department sanctions, targeting more than 24 individuals, companies, and vessels involved in exporting Iranian oil and natural gas. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also warned 2 Chinese banks directly and issued letters to financial institutions in China, Hong Kong, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman that they face secondary sanctions for handling Iranian funds. The administration has described the combined naval blockade and economic sanctions campaign as the financial equivalent of a bombing campaign, designed to cut off Iran's ability to pay its loyalists and sustain its government. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche stated publicly this week that the Justice Department would support congressional public hearings for survivors of convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, aligning with the call made by First Lady Melania Trump in her White House statement last week. The announcement signals a departure from the Justice Department's previous posture under former Attorney General Pam Bondi, whose handling of the Epstein files contributed to her firing. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer has indicated the committee will move towards scheduling the hearings. Senate Republicans and House Republicans blocked back-to-back war powers resolutions on Iran this week. The Senate on Wednesday, 47-52. The House on Thursday, 213-214. With only Senator Rand Paul and Representative Thomas Massie crossing party lines to support the Democratic effort. The votes come as the 60-day war powers clock is set to expire April 29th, and some Republican senators, including Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, have said Congress will likely need to pass an authorization for use of military force at that point to provide legal cover for continued operations and unlock the administration's supplemental war spending request. The White House expressed optimism Thursday about an imminent second round of direct United States-Iran nuclear and ceasefire negotiations to be hosted again by Pakistan. Pakistani Field Marshal Asim Munir completed meetings with Iranian officials in Tehran on Wednesday and returned to Islamabad, carrying a signal from Tehran that the country remains open to further talks if the Lebanon situation stabilizes, which the Thursday ceasefire announcement may now help enable. Vice President Vance has confirmed he is prepared to lead the American delegation in any new round of talks, with the core nuclear enrichment gap, 20 years demanded by the United States versus 3 to 5 years offered by Iran, remaining the central obstacle. The Trump administration has widened its focus in the Iran blockade campaign to pursue vessels beyond the Strait of Hormuz and the Arabian Gulf, with General Kane confirming that American military assets in other theaters globally are being deployed to intercept Iranian-linked shipping. Iran's military command responded by threatening to extend retaliation to the Sea of Oman and the Red Sea, waterways critical to Gulf Arab states, European energy supply, and global commerce. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for all parties to honor the ceasefire and restart negotiations, saying there is no military solution to the current crisis. That's your full briefing for Friday, April 17th, 2026. I'm Nova Blake. Stay informed, stay ahead. We'll see you next time.